So last Wednesday, we had a Bible study like we're trying to do every week, like we do every week. And after the Bible study, my wife and my daughter and myself eventually got to a point where we could recline. We've got this, when we moved to our new house, we've got these recliner sofas. They're not, well, it's one sofa, but they just have a little individual spot. We've got a spot for you just to recline and watch TV. And let me tell you, it is quite the pleasure in life, laying back with your family on those recliner sofa, watching shows together. And we were sitting there, and during the show, or as we were getting the show ready, I think we had just laid down, we were listening to the crickets. We could hear crickets chirping very loudly from the outside. And so Violet made a comment about that, asking about it. And I said to her, well, you know, he's just showing off for the women, for the girls. He's just showing off. He's trying to, impress the women. That's why he's making those noises. And she thought I was talking about like just regular women walking around the street, like women. I said, no, like female crickets. And so that started a whole big thing. And she asked me, well, Dad, did you do stuff? Because I told her, well, all males do that. All males do things to impress ladies and women. That's just what we do. And she goes, well, Dad, did you do stuff to try to impress Mom? And I said, well, yeah. And she said, well, what did Mom say about that? And I said, your mom said those are the biggest muscles I've ever seen in my life. And at the time that I said it to her, I expected just a laugh like this, but I didn't get that. I got a straight face, and I'm going to paraphrase here. She said to me, but Dad, where'd all the muscles go? So that got me thinking about a lot of things, right? But one of the things that got me thinking about is strength. What is strength? Where does it come from? And we all remember that marketing campaign. I don't know if it's still going on today. It's, quite questionable, the science behind it, but the Got Milk campaign. They're basically trying to imply, it's still going? Well, they're trying to imply, the dairy industry, that you need milk to be strong and healthy and happy and blah, blah. It's like, got milk? Well, got strength? Do we each individually have strength? Because I think we all can agree that we need strength one way or another. So the first place I want to start is with physical strength, because that's what was on my mind at first. What is physical strength? Is it just muscles? Because there's a lot of people who have muscles, but I've always wondered, does it actually make them stronger? Well, in the sense that they could probably, move furniture easier, in the sense that they could, probably do more things in sports. Yeah, it probably can. But as we all know, that type of strength, the muscular strength, only goes so far and only does so much. So when we're talking about strength, yeah, they're strong people physically, muscular-wise, but, they have their challenges and disadvantages just as much as somebody who has absolutely no amount of muscles. And even these people who get a lot of muscles, it's short-lived for the most part. It's hard to keep that going. It's hard to keep using those muscles in a productive way, especially if you're getting paid for it, professional sports, for any length of time before the body starts to break down or have a little bit more problems with that, keeping that muscle. So I think in a sense we all can agree that muscle strength, it can be a benefit to your health, it can be a benefit to your life and mobility. I will never take my ability to move and function for granted again. I work very hard every day to be able to have enough muscles that work to do anything that a normal person would do, pick up the trash, take out the trash, whatever it is. You don't want to take it for granted because it could be removed from you at any point in time. But I think we all can agree that that's not the end-all be-all. It will fade like a flower. It's here, it's gone, it's there, it's away. So when you also think about strength in this world that we live in, the next thing you're going to hear after the physical, muscular strength, you're going to hear about your mind. He's mentally strong, or she's mentally strong. He's mentally tough, or she's mentally tough. People equate it with the mind. Well, is that the answer to strength? Is that how you get strength? If your mind is strong enough. And I will argue that's even flimsier than your muscle strength is being the answer to getting through what life throws at you. And this is why. First of all, I think the mind gets way too much credit for many, many things in our lives, in our health, in our situations. And what I'm talking about is first of all, I think we all agree that our minds can only do so much. I don't care if you're the smartest person in the world, it's only going to go so far. I used to tell people when I meet with them about their health issues that, listen, if you got every single human being that's ever lived that was a genius, and you put them in the same room and try to get them to figure out the answer to health, they could not do it. Okay? Our minds are only so capable, even though they're miraculous, they're only so capable of doing so many things and figuring out so many things. And we know as a Bible-believing church that ultimately the only mind that really knows the answer is not our own. Another reason I say the mind gets too much credit is because many of the things that we experience that we hear defines a person as being mentally weak is absolutely false. For example, if somebody has anxiety, they are not mentally weak. Believe it or not, and I can back this up with things that I don't have time for, anxiety has nothing to do with your mind. And I'll hash this out a little bit for you. If somebody's depressed, in this society we live in, they will deem you as mentally weak or something wrong with your mind. That is absolutely, positively, biologically false. Okay? If you have emotion, if you cry, if you show it, you are mentally not strong. That is false. That is not true biologically, and it's not true in reality in any way, shape, or form. Okay? So we start talking about mental toughness, and people will say, what are you talking about? What do you mean if you have depression or anxiety or you're scared or you're emotional, you're not, of course you're mentally weak. Because if you're mentally strong, nothing would faze you. Let me give you an example. Vietnam. Picture a kid 18 years old in a foxhole in Vietnam, his friends getting blown to pieces around him, things coming at him seeing things that nobody would ever come back from, and he sits there straight-faced with a gun, doing his thing, and nothing appears to be fazing him. And you look at the person next to him, curled up in a ball, crying, saying, God, just get me out of here, I can't take it anymore. Is the person with the gun still shooting mentally strong and the person begging God for help mentally weak? Absolutely not. Now there's multiple layers to hash this out. One of the ways is that physiologically what's happening there. Physiologically what's happening has nothing to do with their minds, their own brains, has nothing to do with it. Because here's the thing. Remember I said the brain gets too much credit for so many things. Well, I'll give you an example with the Vietnam. The guy sitting there shooting may not be very smart. He may not be the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Not only wise, but he may have no common sense. He may in society, regular society, be deemed as somebody who has no clue about anything and is not mentally strong at all or even intelligent at all. The guy next to him in a ball might be literally, I mentioned a genius, might be a genius. Might be the smartest, the valedictorian of his class. He may be able to handle things in other ways, in other areas that the guy still shooting couldn't do. What's the difference? What's the difference between somebody who has anxiety and depression and somebody who can handle a stress situation and somebody can't? Well, it's not the mind, because we all have minds that will digest what's going on around us. That doesn't decide whether we have those things. What decides that is our glands. Our endocrine system decides how we feel and how we react to stress or problems or bad things. If you have a person with really strong adrenal glands and you come up to them and say, I'm sorry to tell you, your family's just been killed in a car accident, they're going to be devastated, they're going to be sad, but they're going to be able to hold it together. If you tell a person with weak adrenal glands, I'm sorry to tell you, your family was killed in a car accident, they're going to be sad and devastated, and they're going to physically fall apart in front of your eyes. Is it their mind that made the difference? Absolutely not. It had nothing to do with their mind. It had to do with the strength of their glands. You can't handle stress literally without your adrenal glands being strong enough to do it. The thyroid controls the adrenal glands. So if you have a thyroid issue, that's going to make the adrenal glands not work right, and vice versa, and a lot of things in between. That's the long and short of it. So can we say that our strength, we can depend on our strength of our mind to get us through our problems or issues or stressors or disappointments or we cannot get through with the power of our mind. Now, so where does strength come from? What is true strength all about? Well, from a physiological standpoint, you can exercise and get built up physically to be able to be more active and more able. You can do that. That may not help you get ahead in many areas of life, but being able and to do physical things in life is important. You can strengthen your endocrine system, your adrenal glands, your thyroid, other things like that, to give you the internal physiological strength to be able to handle trauma and stress and challenges better physically. You can do that. And God can show you the way. But I think we all can admit as well that even that, no matter if you do all the right things in those areas, will go so far. We can't rely on our own understanding. We know that as Christians. So what is the answer? Well, if you want your body to be able to physically handle stress more, you know who to turn to? The Creator. We know we have a health message we talk about a lot. There's things you can do to build up your glands, things you can do to build up your health, blah, blah, blah. But all healing ultimately comes from God. Jeremiah 33, verse 6. If anybody wants to read it, they can, or I can read it. It's right here in front of me. So I'll just start off. I'm going to do some more verses after that, so if you want to get your Bibles ready, but I'll start off this one. Jeremiah 33, 6. This is I'm actually going to start quoting some of my sermons, the modern literal version, because I love it so much. Sometimes it seems a little bit more confusing, but sometimes a lot of times it's a lot more enlightening. But this verse is just kind of pretty straightforward regardless. But Jeremiah 33, 6 in the modern literal version says, "Behold, I will bring it." It was referring to is Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, spiritual Israel, physical Israel, the whole 9 yards. "I will bring it health and cure, and I will cure them, and I will reveal to them abundance of peace and truth." So right there, whether by the hand of miraculous workings of God, divine interventions in guiding us to the right things, the right foods, the right lifestyles, the right exercises, the right herbs, whatever it is, ultimately it all comes from God one way or another, and that's a promise in Jeremiah that I cling to. I cling to it when I'm well, I cling to it when I'm sick. It's beautiful. So we know where we can go for guidance and help to getting physically stronger, to be able to be strong, muscle-wise, endocrine system-wise, health-wise. We turn to God one way or another, directly and indirectly. He will help us. But there's a deeper strength in that. How do we get that strength? How do we get miraculous strength at times? When people go through bad, people told me, like, "Chad, how did you deal with some of the things you dealt with when you were so sick?" And I tell everybody, it wasn't me. Like, I know my limitations, and there was nothing physically I could do to handle what I was going through. And God Himself gave me an inner strength that I didn't know was possible. I figured out firsthand the strength that had come from God. So let's turn to some more scripture to kind of instate in us from God's own word how to get this strength, the true strength, the strength that is more important than muscles, even more important than the strength of your endocrine system that we so desperately need to handle physical stress in this world and trauma and hurt and heartache. But even more important than that, even if we don't have those things, even if we don't have the muscles to lift chairs around and to take out the trash, even if we don't have one of the strongest people I know is Ed, a member of our church who cannot walk. He's been in a wheelchair since he's 17, and the guy does things that I could only imagine being able to do. Like, talk about inner strength. And I know he's a ornery, wiry guy and all, but I'm telling you, he's got some strength from the Lord going on in there too. So no matter who you are, you have to be able to navigate this life. So let's turn to Isaiah. The book of Isaiah is full of so many verses that really show God's vision of what true strength is and how to get it. Isaiah chapter 40, Verse 29, he gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. So we're weak, right? Or we can be weak, and if we don't think we're weak, we're going to find out we're weak. It's going to happen at some point in time. My dad, I've talked about his health issues. My dad used to be the strongest person I knew. He could handle anything. I mean, he owned businesses, dealt with stuff that I couldn't imagine, still to this day dealing with, and he never wavered, never faltered. Well, now he can't handle anything. So as strong as we think we are, trust me, we'll find out soon enough we're weak. But the good news is, he gives power to the faint. And to him who has no might, he increases the strength. Let's stay in Isaiah. Stay in chapter 40, move down to verse 31. In my version, Isaiah 40, chapter 31 says, "For those who wait for Jehovah will renew their strength. They will mount up with pinions," which is referring to wings, like eagles. "They will run and not be weary. They will walk and not be faint." Either way, it's all saying the same thing. And that is, quite a promise to cling to. He says if we wait for the Lord, if we wait for Jehovah, he will renew our strength. And if even though we're weary, we will be able to keep walking forward, moving forward, and not be faint. And I think that's symbolic of any challenge. It's not just physical, but symbolic of any emotional challenge that we have, or trauma, or in our life, obstacle to get over. Staying in Isaiah, turning to chapter 41, verse 10. "So yeah, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God." Okay, so he's saying, don't be afraid, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, disheartened. Don't be downtrodden, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. Notice that. I love that. And I don't know if it's different in a different version, but he stops and says, yes. Before you even ask, yes, I will help you. It's like even saying, don't even have to ask. Yes, I will uphold you with my right hand of my righteousness. So God is way ahead of us in his help. He's way ahead of us in giving us strength. And he tells us not to be afraid and not to be dismayed. Okay, let's move to a verse actually in the New Testament, which this was a verse that we looked at during our Bible study. It's Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. In our Bible study this week, we looked at this verse. It's a favorite, I know, of many people, many believers. But it's just, because we're in the New Testament now. And so the New Testament does not take away anything from the Old Testament, but it just, further hashes out as Christians not only what God expects of us, but it shows us what God is doing for us. "I am strong in all things in Christ who is empowering me." I am strong in all things in Christ who is empowering me. This is direct credit to Christ for the power. It's for the strength. It's coming from Christ, not us. If we turn to Psalms, the book of Psalm, chapter 73, back to the Old Testament. This is, Violet always asks me, what's your favorite book of the Bible? And I go, well, I don't know. It might change from day to day. Sometimes I say Genesis, sometimes I say Revelation, sometimes I say Song of Solomon, or excuse me, not Song of Solomon, but Ecclesiastes, because Ecclesiastes has just got this thing about it that it just kind of like this reminds me of when I was young and searching for God, and I'd read Ecclesiastes, and it really did something for me. But I always ask her, what's your favorite book? And she'll almost always say Psalm. She likes the praising. Exodus. And I think she said Proverbs, but we're going to turn to the book of Psalm. It's so inspirational. But like any other book, there's hints of what we can do to have real strength, true strength. Psalm chapter 73, verse 26. "My flesh and my heart fails." I mean, like this is talking to God on a one-to-one level. My flesh and my heart fails, but God is the strength, not a part of my strength, the strength of my heart and my everlasting portion. Now you have to understand, and I'm sure most of us do, when we talk about a heart, and most of the time in the biblical sense, it's not talking about obviously your physical cardiovascular heart, but oftentimes there's the implications of talking about your mind in the very essence of who you are and how you feel and what you think. So we know the importance of heart change. We know the importance of having a heart that's not hardened and a heart that's dedicated to the Lord. But he's saying in Psalm that that God is the strength of our hearts. And so if anything's breaking us apart, breaking our heart apart, God is our everlasting portion. I think that the verse to me that really puts this all together in our Christian walk, because not only do we need to be strong for our families, we need to be strong for ourselves to get through this life. It can be so challenging, but we need to have strength that can be an influence on others, those who don't believe, or even believers, like we've talked about in our Bible study. There are a lot of believers who don't really have that true relationship with Jesus, and they look at us for our example in our lives of kind of like, they may not say anything, but they're observing us consciously and subconsciously. And when we show them through our own lives how to have the true strength of God, that can help them in not only their walk, daily life and walk, but their walk with God and to come closer to Him. The last verse is in 2 Corinthians. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 10. Now let's think about this verse for a second. This is an important verse. And the reason it's important is not only does it hit home the basic idea of where actual true strength comes from, but another reason why it's so important is because let me tell you right now, one of the hardest things in this life that I have found is when people come against you. And one of the hardest things I found in my life is when people come against you for doing the right thing. It is hard to deal with. Sometimes people will attack you. Sometimes people will attack your church. Some people attack your family, your marriage, attack you at work. And not only are they wrong and unjustified, but they can also be unrelenting regardless of that fact. They won't stop. How do you deal with that? How do you handle that? That is a hard pill to swallow. Well, here it says in 2 Corinthians 12:10, once again, hence I am delighted in weakness, in insults, in calamities, in persecutions, in distresses, on behalf of Christ. For whenever I am weak, then I am mighty. And that's one thing that you will find when you're at your weakest point. When you're at your weakest point, whether physically ill or through relationships and trauma or whatever life throws at you, financial, whatever it is, you will find out that in your weakest point is actually your strongest point. And it's not your strongest point because of you. It's your strongest point if you get to the point where you're so weak that you realize the only thing you have is God. Because when you realize that is when the real strength will come out. There's somebody else said this, God is at His best when things are at its worst. And it's the truth. And so no matter what happens, as you encourage yourself, your family members, your friends, and on the daily life, knowing that even though you may be weak physically, you may be weak in your endocrine system, which makes it hard to handle stress and trauma. Wherever it may be, you may be weak in the bank account, in the finances, wherever it is. It doesn't matter, because God's strength is the only real strength there is, and it will cover everything. And not only will it cover everything, it's eternal. It's not going anywhere. It's permanent.